Welcome back, everyone. This is Al-Fadi, and with us here in studio is Dr. Jay Smith, and I hope that you've been enjoying everything that we have shared with you.
To these extant manuscripts. Let's go to the slide. I'm going to do everything in one go. So hold on. Here we go. Are you ready? So there is the timeline, the blue line at the bottom. Now, we start with the Sahaba, and again, this is what they claim. They claim, the Farid and his other cohorts, they all claim that that's when the Sahaba and the Tabi were living. How we know that's not the case. They're living, well, we thought it was, the Muwatta was there, but we now know the Muwatta actually was written here. So let's kick that out, and let's go to the others. And as you can see, these are 12th and 13th, 11th, 12th, and 13th. So as far as the Sahaba and the Tabi'un are saying, they are not from the 7th or 8th century. They're from the 11th to the 13th century. So goodbye, Sahaba. Goodbye. We're not going to use those guys anymore. Now, the second genre we looked at were the Hadith, and we looked at the 6 major compilations, all attributed supposedly from the 9th and 10th century, from 870 up to 915. That's what the Muslims have always been telling us. In fact, that's what we've been saying until just now. We know that's not the case, that they start to appear in the 11th, going to the 12th, to the 13th, 14th, all the way up into the 15th with Sahih Bukhari. So if so we're talking about from the 11th to the 14th century. That's a good another 300 years to 500 years later. So let's get rid of goodbye. Let's get back goodbye to the Hadith. When we looked at the Sira are ones that we always thought were by Ibn Hisham and Al-Waqidi there in the 9th century. No, they are not. They actually start to appear in the 11th century with the Fez, in the 13th and the 14th and the 15th, all the way up to the 16th century, but introduced in its canonical form by this guy here, this German, in the 19th century. So bye-bye to Ibn Hisham and Al-Waqidi, we don't need you anymore. And then we ended with the Tafsir Tarikh, as you like to pronounce it. There is the Tafsir of Al-Tabari. Now, there are others that right after that. Zamakhshari, Suyuti, Baidawi, they all come after the 10th century. But even Tabari, who is the most authoritative, he is the one that everybody goes to, is not from the 10th century. They come from 2 documents that were written in the 12th century that are still in Turkey today. You can go and look at them, but compiled in their canonical form that we use today by this Dutchman doing so between 1879 and 1901. So in other words, in the last century. We're only talking about a little over 100 years ago, 120 years ago. So let's get rid of Tabari. Bye-bye. Get rid of him here.
So we are closer to the action than Al-Tabari himself.
Here we go. Yes, that's true. Isn't that interesting? But here's what's fascinating. Take a look at this. Everything that they've been attributing comes in that time period, 200 to 300 years later. We now know that all of it comes in this time period here, which is 400 to 900 years too late. What that means is, we've been told that all the stories surrounding Muhammad's life, all the stories surrounding how Islam began, were written by those who saw and heard him, thus by eyewitnesses or by those who came a few generations later. Now look at that. Just look and see above that everything we now know about Muhammad was actually originally created 400 to 900 years later, after he presumably lived, yet not canonized into a written text that we use today 12 to 1270 years later, proving that it is all fraudulent. It is all fraudulent. Now, just take a look at something else you notice. Look that time period from the 11th century up until the 17th century, 16th century. From the 11th to the 16th, who was in power at that time?
Well, I mean,
that's the late Abbasids. And that's the Ottoman.
The Ottomans.
And most of those are during the Ottoman period, from 1200 to later. So most of what we know about everything Muhammad said, everything Muhammad did, comes from the late Abbasid and the Ottoman period. These are what the Ottomans believed that Muhammad said and did, and how Islam began. Attributed back to characters in the 9th and 10th century, who themselves probably never existed, or they possibly did exist. I'm not going to say that yet, and that's going to come next. I'm going to unpack it in the next episode. But I want you to see it. Here's one more. I'm going to look at one more, go back to the graph. Here is everything on one sheet. all right? With no animation. This is in the PowerPoint. Go and get this and print this out, folks. Just print this page out because you have the entire argument with all the problems of the Hadith, the Sahaba, the Sira, and the Tafsir and the Tarikh all on one page. Everything they say can happen to the left of that red line is all fraudulent. It all happened to the right of that red line. Okay? Next time, we're going to unpack this and show you the ramifications of what we're talking about.